There's a little-known part of Hollywood that most people are not aware of, known as the Audience Test Preview. The book, Audienceology, reveals this for the first time. Our podcast series, Don't Kill the Messenger, brings this book to life, taking a peek behind the curtain. And now, join author and entertainment research expert, Kevin Goetz.
Every time I have lunch or dinner with today's guest, he always brings a pad and a pen. He jots down notes during our conversation about topics that catch his interest. That is just who he is, an insatiably curious human. This is the quality that sets him apart in Hollywood and leads him to fresh insights that truly fuel his creative process. It also happens to be the subject of one of his books called A Curious Mind. Listeners, I am thrilled to have with me today the prolific, Oscar-winning producer and self-made Hollywood mogul, Brian Grazer. If my facts are correct, his movies and television shows have earned 47 Oscar nominations, 242 Emmy nominations, and his movies have grossed close to $15 billion in global box office, more than the GDP of a few countries on the planet. He co-founded Imagine Entertainment with partner Ron Howard, and together they won the Academy Award for Best Picture for A Beautiful Mind. Honestly, what more do I need to say? Brian, welcome to my show.
Wow, thanks for having me on.
Jeez.
I'm excited to be with you.
I'm nervous after reading all that. You're so damn impressive. What can I tell you?
Oh, thank you, Kevin.
Brian, you are one of my favorite people in the entire business, and for so many years, and for so many reasons. There's a sense of humility that you have that you've retained despite your enormous success. And I think that's your superpower.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I never get too heady, ever.
What is it about the curiosity that these notes and these curiosity meetings where you meet super interesting people? I'm laughing because as I said that, I go, oh, wow, he brings a pen and paper. Am I one of those people?
You are. Of course you are.
Well, thank you.
You're absolutely an expert in what you do. You are the single expert in what you do. And everyone relies upon it and you to understand how to cut their movie for so many different things. That's why you're so valuable and why I'm on the podcast right now.
One of the things that I want to sort of talk about is that you seem to respond to experts in whatever field, and that's what you seek out. Is that fair?
Yes, 100%. So the first 2 or 3 years, about 40 years ago, when I started, I would reach out to a new person every single day without fail. But they were all within the media business. So it could be Jules Stein, the founder of MCA. It could be Lou Wasserman, who I spent a lot of time with. It was the chairman of every studio.
At that point, you were a nascent producer and you wanted to learn about the business. So you met the best of the best in the business. Is that right?
Yes.
So what kind of things were you asking them?
Why I would do those meetings with, say, Richard Brooks or even Mel Brooks or even Herbert Ross
my Lord.
Any of these great directors, Coppola, George Lucas. I mean, I've met every one of them. No one ever said no. Every person said yes because of the way I would ask them. I would say, hi, my name is Brian Grazer. Then I'd say, I've researched your boss because of the following reasons, and I will take only 5 minutes of his time, and I absolutely do not want a job. And so that's how it began, essentially. That was my bridge.
And I absolutely don't want a job. I love that.
Absolutely don't want a job. And I would encapsulate that with some charm and, over that time, genuine innocence. I'd learned from all of them sort of a uniform thoughts. One is I would learn their sensibility and how they see film in the world. I remember George Roy Hill, I met with him, who did Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Oh, yeah.
What did I gain from him? George Roy Hill. He was really cool, very unaffected, I found, really cool guy, and wore camouflage pants every day. And what got me to even think about George Roy Hill is I was a little nobody happened to be on the Universal lot, probably delivering papers or something. And I see this guy in a t-shirt and camo pants going over to see, because I asked somebody, who is that? What's he doing? Well, that's George Roy Hill. He's going to see Lou Wasserman. And I thought, that's really fucking hip. I love this guy just because he's wearing camos and a t-shirt. And then I start to learn about his filmography. Then I made a point to try to get to know him. My bridge to him was secretaries and assistants. Then there was someone named Pat Kelly that ran his company and then ran First Artists. So I'd like to learn the sensibility. I'd like to understand why they're doing it, understanding the impact that they thought or were creating in the culture. All those things had a lot of meaning to me. And of course, and I'll finish this, it demystified the language and this sort of opaque, foggy world of Hollywood, because you have to try to understand, like, beneath it is a business. And how does the business operate? It operates by somebody having leverage. And it's predominantly that person having creative leverage.
The writer, for example, owning the writer owning their material, or whoever owns the material, for example.
Yeah. Or in my case, because I had no money, I would just write stories, and then I'd write, 2 or 3 or sometimes 10 pages on an idea that I would hatch. Because I learned when I was 23 or 4 that you had to have leverage. And again, I started writing, and that was my way into legitimate Hollywood.
What was your first leverage? What was your first significant leverage?
Well, I could give you the first one, but it failed. The first one was called The Last Ride. And The Last Ride was a motorcycle movie. Never got made because what happened is I somehow got to pitch it to Alan Ladd in a parking lot.
I have a feeling that was you stalking him and
popping out of a bush.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's somehow. Yeah. It wasn't just totally coincidental. In any event, had this thing. I wrote it up. He liked it. He said, "Go get Walter Hill." So Walter Hill was a big director at that time, and he'd been a big director. I get Walter Hill. He's interested. Then I find that I have another little hoop to jump through, which is I need to get a writer, because Walter Hill, who is a writer, doesn't want to write it. The writer was named David Giler. I think he was one of the writers on A Parallax View, which was directed by Alan Pakula, who I also got to know really well. And just years before he died, he gave me the book Friday Night Lights, which I made. So all these things turn into something. Sometimes decades later, I'd have a chance to meet.
Friday Night Lights went back that far.
It did.
And the serendipity of that.
Yeah, it didn't go back 40 years, but I met him 40 years ago. And then I would try to, I would, with everybody that was meaningful, and basically almost every person I met was meaningful to me, I would stay in touch. And often they would respond back to me in touch. And Alan Pakula was one of those people. So it was probably 10 years later, the book was written, and he said, "Let's do this together," because I was a hustler.
Oh, no shit. Brian, can we go back to your boyhood? What informs the man that jumps out of a bush in a parking lot to pitch Alan Ladd? What gives you the confidence to call Lou Wasserman's office and Walter Hill's office and all the other folks that you contacted? What was it like being a young Brian Grazer?
Tom Hanks summed it up like this. He asked a question kind of similar. And I said, well, I started to make money like at 7 years old when I had a paper route. 4 days a week, I would have over 100 papers that I had to deliver in my neighborhood on my little Stingray bike.
Where was the neighborhood?
In Van Nuys. But this is the part that's the hook. The paper route, I was delivering the worst of all papers, a free paper. The only way you get paid is if you knock on the door, and it's like a volunteer payment. Would you be willing to pay for the Valley News and Green Sheet? And on Thursday, that paper weighed 500 pounds. And you'd knock at the door, and sometimes they'd look out their window and then they just run away. And so I'd get like 40% of the people do a payment. Tom Hanks was, that's how you became a producer. That's it. That's your beginning.
Exactly.
Because I had desperation chutzpah to try to deliver free newspapers and try to get a payment for it.
So you are more of a businessman than a creative man at that point.
Then.
So I would argue that you have the perfect marriage of left and right brain. I actually feel like I have a very similar kind of chemistry.
I bet you do, yes.
And so do many entrepreneurs. They have to have the vision and the creative on the one hand, but they have to have a good business sense and a sense of nothing's going to stop me as well married. So let's talk about the creative, though. When was your first impression made of like a movie or a TV show that you said, this is cool? Like, I really love this entertainment.
The series of James Bond movies. I love James Bond movies. I mean, I saw every one of them multiple times. The movie that really gave me an understanding of purpose was E.T., which I saw at the Cinerama Dome. I only recently, 2 years ago, at a friend of mine's, Bob Iger's house at his birthday, I told Steven, I said, you're the movie. Because what happened is with the movie E.T., always going to a movie theater was the experience that was really hostile and aggressive, fighting for a parking spot, fighting for a ticket, trying to get in line for the food and hope your seat doesn't get taken, endless stuff like that. And people were stepping on my feet. The movie E.T., everyone did exactly the same thing, aggression. But the end of the movie, zero aggression.
Wow.
Zero. No pushing, no shoving. People's consciousness, emotional energy, everything was elevated in a transcendent way. And they were operating on a different level. And there wasn't any of that. And I thought, I want to make movies that lead to an ending like that, where you're elevated, you're inspired, it's aspirational.
Wow.
So that's my goal.
I'm just literally thinking of most of your movies. And because we've talked at various times over the many, many years, I sort of know many of your favorite movies and ones that were your not so favorite movies. And the ones that are your favorite movies, Backdraft, Cocoon, things like that, right? Those have this emotional...
Or Splash or Parenthood or...
Exactly. Have this elevated sense of heart, of emotionality.
Apollo 13 is all that.
Which leads me to a post that you just wrote on your social about you're in the feelings business. And I'd like to unpack that for a second. What does that mean for you?
I just feel like scripts are designed to ignite emotion. And the emotion that I choose to be ignited is elation.
Friday Night Lights, by the way, same thing.
The feeling of power, like your character that's entered a world that has obstacles, 8 Mile, with Eminem.
Oh, God. I loved that movie, by the way. I found it so inspirational, like a finding yourself, and just a beautiful movie, man.
Thank you. Yeah, characters that have nobility in their drive and in their purpose, and obstacles along the way to achieve that. And when they do, it doesn't even have to be the home run, but it's an emotional home run because that actor, that character has transitioned into a greater place.
Wow.
Like The Power of the Myth or something, it's...
Oh, now you're getting deep with me. I love it.
I love it.
But... Joseph Campbell.
Yeah.
Robert Bly. I mean, these are
very
all
good
heroes of mine.
Yeah.
I mean, I've read all those books of the archetypes and stuff. But without getting too heady, as you say, there is something very deep about many of your movies, I should say, but more about you, the man. You are, to me, the most intriguing of this whole leitmotif of all the movies you've made. Is
Thanks.
Oh, I mean that, really, sincerely. I'm struck by a story you told me at one of our lunches. where it was, and we don't have to get specific about the movie, but it was a Christmas movie, if I recall, that you were telling me about, that you were developing and you just didn't feel it. Your heart
Right.
wasn't in it.
Right.
Can you tell that
Yes.
story? Because it's such a great story about your own truth and about being true to yourself and your feelings, if you will.
The one that I did not make. So there was an idea that one of my executives came to me that I really liked a lot. And she developed it with a writer, et cetera, et cetera. And I realized it wasn't really an elevated idea. It didn't go any place that gave it purpose for me. But we kept developing it. She really loved it. I stopped loving it. And for 3 years, she kept working on it. And I let her work on it and spend money. And then she came in and said, we can push this over the top. I said, why are we doing this? What meaning does it have? And she couldn't answer the meaning. That's exactly what I said to her. I said, why should this exist? And there was no good answer. So I said, we're just cutting it. We're not doing it. We're never doing this. Don't ever talk about it again. And that was the end.
But, what's cool about it is that it was about your limited time, the resources that you have. Why do I want to spend something that I'm not feeling, that I'm not excited about, that I'm not elevating? Let's go back to your earlier comments about elevating the audience. If it's just a piece of business, then why do it?
Yeah, we should all try to avoid just the piece of business because that's not very rewarding.
Have you ever had a success with a piece of business? I bet the answer is no.
Not that I can think of.
I know. That's an interesting revelation, though, isn't it?
Yeah, the great successes that I've had come from internal truth and from soul, like connecting to the soul and expressing my soul, feeling that my soul has inhabited this subject. When it doesn't do that, the chance of its success is very, very low.
I was about to ask you, and you might have just answered it, so it's a bit of a loaded question maybe. You are one of the, let's say, 5 most prolific and successful producers out there. What is your differentiation? What makes you special, different, unique than those other producers, for example?
Well, I put myself completely into the meaning or the soul of the material. So I'm living out something that's very much part of me. And you asked a question when we started, like the curiosity conversations. I try to approach every world with a beginner's mind, with complete innocence, whether it's a science, medicine, politics, religion, all art forms. I mean, now I've become that person that makes movies about hip hop, but I didn't know anything about hip hop. I knew nothing, absolutely zero. And I just happened to have a curiosity conversation with Old Dirty Bastard from the Wu-Tang Clan.
Oh, great.
And that was just because I had a quota to myself, a discipline of a new person outside my specific business once a week. It was on a Thursday, and I thought I got to get somebody by Friday. And I was in New York, and I overheard this radio interview with Howard Stern and old ODB, Old Dirty Bastard. And I thought, I want to meet that crazy guy. Like, he seems insane, but he's reaching people, speaking to people, speaking to the people. So I did on a Friday, and I realized it's not just an inferior subculture rap, it's the actual culture. I was just in my own world.
Wow.
Yeah. So I realized people classified hip hop as like an inferior subculture. It's going to dissipate. And I just thought that's so untrue because I immediately went and met with Public Enemy, with Chuck D. I met with Slick Rick. I met with LL Cool J when he was very young. So I realized this is what all the kids, everybody is paying attention to. This is the voice.
Wow. Well, when we come back, I want to talk with you, Brian, about where things are heading in our business and how you adapt to a new world order. We'll be back in a moment. Listeners, the Motion Picture and Television Fund is a nonprofit charitable organization that supports working and retired members of the entertainment community. This wonderfully run organization offers assistance for living and aging with dignity and purpose in the areas of health and social services, including temporary financial assistance, case management, and residential living, and has been a crucial lifeline to thousands during and beyond the strikes. To learn more, visit mptf.com. Please join me in helping others in our industry during times of need. There are so many ways to offer support and get involved. Thank you. We're back with the incomparable Brian Grazer, truly incomparable. Brian, I have a few questions that I wanted to ask you in the beginning of the program before we move on. Who was one of your mentors coming up in the business? Not just a curiosity conversation, but who actually taught you nuts and bolts or more than a single conversation?
Well, there are a lot of well-known directors that said things to me that find their way in.
You didn't have like one person who took you by the hand kind of thing?
Not really. I had one mentor, but it was a little bit later than the beginning of my career, named Jerry Perenchio.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And he was once...
He was with Norman Lear and Bud Yorkin, right?
Yorkin, yeah. And prior to that, he was an agent working for Lou Wasserman and found his way to buy and sell hotels in Vegas. So he was a very ballsy guy. And he also, prior to working with Norman Lear, he promoted the fight of the century, the Ali Frazier fight in 1972, which is even in a movie I did called American Gangster.
That's right.
So he was my mentor.
Wow. Did you have a favorite film growing up that you said Bond movies, but was there a movie, you remember like your first movie you saw?
Yeah.
And did it leave an impression on you? I'm sure it did.
Well, there were first movies that I can remember. I can't go that far back. I liked the one that Ron sings, the Wells Fargo Wagon. What's
Music Man.
Music Man. I love the Music Man. I love The Sound of Music. But when I saw West Side Story, I made a point to become not just meet, but be friends with Robert Wise, the director.
Oh, I remember sitting next to him and Millicent at an event years ago, and I was speechless because The Sound of Music is my favorite movie of all time.
Mine too.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I love that movie. I've seen that 50 times.
I call it cinematic perfection, and people say, I'm surprised by that answer because I just think it encompasses everything about filmmaking, from the script stage to the theme of it, to the casting, to the actors, to the characters, to the story, to the music, all of it. The settings, I mean, just incredible.
Yeah.
All of it. And Robert Wise was such a talent. He started out he was a great editor, right?
Yeah. A lot of directors, of course, Richard Brooks, I had a script in my hand after I got to know him. First of all, he was very interesting, this guy. He had his company was called PAX, P-A-X, PAX Enterprises. And in the late 70s, he had like electric eyes and security, and he was like super paranoid, apparently. Wow. And all sorts of like surveillance and security of that time, guarding the exterior and interior of his office. And I had a script and I said, I have this property, right? And he goes, don't you dare call a script property. It's a work of art.
Wow.
It's not a property. He went berserk. And he said, a property is real estate, not a script. And I thought, that stuck with me.
Wow.
It really means a lot. It's like even in today's very transactional time of making movies and television, some people do just the transaction, they don't watch the movies.
Or they make programmers or something,
Yeah, and they just like the lifestyle of Hollywood or something, but they're not in it for a deep reason. Ron and I are kind of in it for a deep reason, and we still feel the romance of Hollywood. It would be great to bring back the romance of Hollywood. There must be some way to do that.
Well, let's talk about that. Next year, you and Ron will be celebrating your 40th anniversary. I believe 1985 was your first movie.
Yeah.
And what does that mean when I say 40 years married to the same person?
No kidding.
It's unbelievable.
Certainly outlasted any other relationship.
Well, you and most people, by the way, when you talk about a marriage, a business marriage like that, I honestly, on the way up here to the studio, was thinking, who had as long a relationship in the history of the entertainment business more than you and Ron? And I could not come up with anyone. I thought of maybe Zanuck and Brown. They didn't last as long. Stanley Jaffe and Sherry Lansing, no way as long. But you guys have really just been perfect partners. What makes it a perfect marriage?
Well, almost everything about our external lives are opposite. I'm very outgoing. I'm social. I'm constantly importing people to me or me exporting myself to those people to learn, to grow. It's my style of learning. Ron has a very different style of learning. He would learn by reading and he would do by research, or he'd have somebody set up a meeting. But I'm just like in that moment and go like immediately. And it's just different. I always say to Ron, I'm the prospector. I'm going to find the idea. And
you're the nurturer?
Yeah. And when he agrees that's the hole he's willing to drill in, then we almost every time have success. I'd say 80% of the times, if he and I both agree on something together and are equally excited creatively and spiritually, I don't mean that religiously, but spiritually, it almost always has success.
Someone told me the greatest relationships, most successful relationships, understand their core values and are aligned in their core values. Almost everything in a relationship is negotiable, except your core values.
That's so smart.
So if
that's
you
100% right.
If you have a core value that's off, you're probably not going to make it in any kind of marriage or business relationship.
Right.
But if you have that and you can operate and negotiate all these small things. I mean, my husband and I have been together 30 years.
Wow.
We are aligned on so many fundamental levels of our values, right? And that's why we've stayed together. We argue, we fight, we're like the Bickersons, and yet the love is there and we're in for the long haul.
Wow, that's awesome. Congrats, 30 years.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. But I think that is part of your success is this yin and yang that you talk about. It just works.
Yeah, on a sort of deep level, Ron is covetous and feels most comfortable in his childhood life, meaning, but into his 20s or so, being on a soundstage, making living movies. He can deconstruct a project from nothing to an endpoint. And he has an insatiable power and stamina to work 18 hours a day. His value system is as high as you could get. Always very humble, doesn't yell at people, doesn't abuse anybody ever. I think in my 40 years, I've only seen him really get mad twice, I think.
Want to tell us what one of them was?
I think he got mad at Wilford Brimley once.
No way.
Well, because he was a very crabby guy.
Oh, I love it.
Very, yeah. Effective actor.
I know he got mad at David Friendly once, who was a guest of mine.
Really?
Because David told me a story on this podcast that he did something horrible. It was during, I think, The Paper.
Yeah, called The Paper. David Kep wrote it, Michael Keaton and Randy Quaid.
Was Duvall in it?
Duvall.
So the story goes that Michael Keaton was coming into your office and David intercepted him before he went up and said, you know, that speech at the end is something you should deliver, not Duvall.
Oh, no. Oh, my God.
I know. He was a newbie to our business.
That's really a big mistake.
David said, Ron reamed me and said, don't you ever talk to one of my actors. And I said,
wow.
Go, Ron. Said, David.
I know.
I said, what a bonehead move.
Now I know 3 times.
What a bonehead move. Okay, let me ask you about winning the Academy Award, because I did ask Ron this, and he gave me a great sort of story of him going to the stage as director. And the winner is A Beautiful Mind, producers Brian Grazer, and Ron Howard.
Yeah.
What goes through your mind at that moment?
Well, first, I was like so excited.
Not relieved first?
Beyond, even though, yeah, relieved, but really, really, really excited because I felt we were jinxed because we didn't win on Apollo 13.
Oh, that's
When
what Ron
all
said
of the
too. Ron said the same.
all of the odds were that Apollo 13 was to win, da 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 da. And I'd written a speech for that one, actually, Apollo 13. And when Sidney Poitier opened the envelope, I thought he said my name or something. And I stood up and started walking towards him with a card in my hand. And then they said Braveheart. And I had to walk backwards into my seat.
Oh, apparently, I think that happened to Olivia de Havilland.
Really?
In 1939, when they said, and the winner is Hattie McDaniel. And Olivia de Havilland, at least that's what I heard, got up from the back and started walking towards the stage and had to make her, oh my God.
So I did the same thing.
Oh no.
And then Jim Lovell, the actual astronaut, reached across and said, I never made it to the moon either on Apollo 13, which was true. And he put things in perspective. But getting to win was amazing. I loved it.
I had no speech prepared, truly?
I just had people's names. And it was like so clumsy, I thought. I've never watched it. Just, I seldom watch, but I wasn't myself. And I like doing public speaking. I like any public speaking where I really am just myself and I don't read, I just speak.
Why weren't you yourself?
I was too nervous and I knew I had all these names and I didn't think I'd win. And when we won, I even made a joke of myself. I went up there and I said, I know my nervousness is imperceptible. And people laughed at that because I was so nervous and it was so obvious. And the thing that heightened my sense of nerves was in the front row of the Oscars were all of the female stars that were making a difference in that generation. Renee Zellweger, Julia Roberts, Meryl Streep, Nicole Kidman. I think Cameron Diaz was even there, but they put them all, the beautiful and talented actors in front. And I saw Nicole Kidman's lips move like, Brian, you can do it. And it was like so moving to me.
Oh, I'm going to cry.
I know. Because all those girls knew me personally.
Oh, wow.
One-on-one. I've worked with them all. And they knew me and they sort of know all my dimensions, that I'm outgoing, but they also know I have a shyer or insecure side.
Oh, absolutely. That's what I said. You're a contradiction in a way because you are, I said, with all your success, there's this humility. And the fact that you don't lose that is, I believe, as I said earlier, part of your tremendous success and your superpower because you understand that if you lose that, and you lose curiosity, why continue?
Yeah. Exactly. Then there's no story.
Where are things going, Brian, right now? It's such a changed business. And I am one, as you know, I'm an eternal optimist. I believe in opportunity. You guys have shifted to a lot of documentaries as opposed to features, which are really challenging to do now. I'd like to get your perspective on, as I said, this new world order.
Well, now we actually are doing many more movies, and we just finished a film with Luca Guadagnino called After the Hunt with Julia Roberts, Andrew Garfield, and Io Ibri. And so that's very good. We're ready to make 3 other movies right now. I'm making a movie on Snoop Dogg, on what it's like to live in the world of Long Beach and come out of that world and become, through all of the obstacles, even being charged with murder, his talent and his positive energy has propelled him to become kind of almost a global prophet. He's so beloved and it's respected. So there's several other movies that we're making. I'm going to make another movie with Peter Berg, who did Friday Night Lights, the movie.
What a major talent.
He's so talented. He's really gifted. Yeah. But several other movies that we have that I feel very optimistic about that we're doing. But I also do a lot of documentaries, as you pointed out. We probably do 22 a year.
22 a year?
Yeah, because we started with somebody named Justin Wilkes, who was a partner at Radical Media. He's a dynamo. He's a nice person, but really smart. And he's creative and chop on business. He doesn't gossip. He doesn't small talk. He comes right to it. He can small talk, but he's just an exceptional storyteller.
Well, that's what it's about for you. You told me a great story for my upcoming book next September, which is called How to Score in Hollywood.
I love it.
Thank you. And one of the stories you told me was about your believing in something and having to pitch it to someone. It was about, don't you believe in love?
Yeah. For the most part, movie executives, television executives, they seem to not judge the internal energy or idea of something. They're more tutorial and they mark you down for grammar and punctuation, like, oh, this sentence isn't right. Oh, I don't like that line of dialogue. So what I said to the executive is, I understand those things. We can work on all of that. If those problems were solved, those script problems, does the idea of the movie speak to you in a way that it has meaning and you should do it? In other words, if it's perfect, would you do the movie? And they go, well, I think I would. And I said, listen, what I'm asking you now is, don't you root for love? And the person goes, of course I root for love. I go, that's what this movie's about. It's about rooting for love.
And that's what I wanted to impart to our listeners, is the way you find the essence of the idea, and how that can manifest. We're going to wind down in just a couple of minutes, but before we do, I want to ask about your books. You have written 2 books, and you actually did an updated version of the first book, correct?
Yeah.
You like writing books?
I think it's really hard to write books.
I think it's so damn hard.
Yeah, I think it's really hard.
And I don't know if I'm motivated to do yet another one, because they are so hard and take so much time to do. But it might be like where a woman gives birth and you're like, it's the hardest thing you've ever gone through, she would say. And then
it is.
But she'll do it again in 2 years or 3 years. And then maybe again, after she says never again, maybe there's that other one that comes 2 or 3 years later.
Yeah. Well, I found by writing A Curious Mind, which was my first book, A Curious Mind, The Secret to a Bigger Life, because it not only makes you more successful and gives you a competitive advantage, curiosity, but it expands your life. It expands what you do in the daytime. It expands the options of things you can and will do that you hadn't even thought of. And so there's so many things that curiosity as an engine can do. I felt it was really hard to write it, but it was gratifying to me, gigantically.
I feel the same exact way. Tell me about the second book.
The second book is called Face to Face, The Art of Human Connection.
Why did you write that book?
Because I had a housekeeper, someone that worked in my house, and I said, a version of like, how you doing? How you feeling? And she said, I'm so happy here. I go, well, why are you so happy here? And she said, well, I like the job, but I really like when you talk to me, you look me right in the eyes. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. That gives her a sense of purpose and identity, and it makes her feel like a human being when you look at people in the eyes. And then I started to think, the reason all of the 1,000 people that I'd interviewed for my curiosity conversations, all those people wouldn't have given me so much of themselves if I didn't look at them in the eyes. And I've just been taking that for granted. But looking somebody in the eyes, honestly, really becomes the human Wi-Fi, your ability to connect to somebody. And so that's why I wrote this book called Face to Face, The Art of Human Connection, because none of these people would have done that without a real connection.
And as you said, your difference, say, than Ron's type of learning is about being with the person.
Yeah.
And probably reading their body language, probably getting the nuances As opposed to reading a book, because I'm like you. I guess I'm sort of in between both of you guys.
Yeah.
Like I do like reading and getting facts because I have to in so much of what I do. But I also much prefer the human connection. I think there's nothing replacing it. People talk to me about AI right now constantly, and they're saying, Kevin, what's going to happen in our business with AI? And I just refuse to believe that AI will ever replace the human connection that is unique. It's singular. It's specific.
I think it is too.
And it's not to say that we can't have artificial this, that, and the other thing that are going to be extraordinary.
It's a good tool, but it
There's
doesn't.
something cellular though, and
it doesn't feel pain.
Yes, all of the
It
above.
doesn't feel pain. They can't describe pain because they don't. It doesn't feel
Well,
it.
they can describe it by how people have talked about pain, but they can't. So they're missing that kind of connection. So I agree. I think it's a great area. What is the biggest mistake you've ever made, and what did you learn from that mistake?
I think the biggest mistake is a very big, important company wanted to buy our company and basically have us be a principal and run their media business. And I really connected with the big boss of the company. Like, I really felt his soul. I felt his heart. And there were some business distractions that caused me not to do it. But I regret it because I think he's not only incredibly successful, this person, but as a human being, I just liked him so much.
Good answer.
So I think if somebody presents themselves to you, go beyond the business and try to evaluate them as a human being and the chemistry or alchemy you could have. And I did that, but then I ignored it.
You got into your head, it sounds like, as opposed to following your gut and your feeling, to go bring this theme of this whole podcast back.
Yeah. I ignored my gut. Yeah.
That stomach brain, man, is so much. Has it ever betrayed you, really?
No, because I have a very, my decision-making process is often very informed because of these curiosity conversations. So I'm not coming to any decision that's certainly creative as a dilettante. I've talked to such a variety of people and really paid attention.
If you did not do what you do, what would you have done?
If it's today, I would have been an engineer because...
Not a lawyer, because you dropped out of law school.
Yeah, I never wanted to do that. I just didn't know what to do.
Your father was an attorney, right?
Yeah. So I just thought, I don't know what to do. I'll just go that route or something. But no, engineers, in my view, they solve problems to create a better world. And I'm trying to tell stories to create a unified culture.
Wow.
Where left and right forget they're left and right. Evil becomes good. Good stays good, to unify people.
If you had to go back to school to get 3 master's degrees right now, what would the 3 subjects be?
Engineering, journalism, if there are 3, and psychology.
Wow. I actually think you could be a professor in all of them right now. I really do. Brian
That's
Grazer,
a nice compliment. Yes.
You are, I don't know, what can I say? You're just
a friend.
You know what? I'm going to boil it down to a friend. You're just extraordinary, and I love you, man.
Thank you. I love you too. Keep telling the truth. That's what you do, Kevin.
And you keep doing what you do because we need you, Brian. God bless. To our listeners, I hope you enjoyed our interview today. For other stories like this one, please check out my book, Audienceology, at Amazon or through my website at kevingetz360.com. And you can also follow me on my social media at kevingetz360. Next time on Don't Kill the Messenger, I'll welcome entertainment research and strategy expert and one of my mentors, Catherine Pora. Until then, I'm Kevin Goetz. And to you, our listeners, I appreciate you being part of the movie-making process. Your opinions matter.